In this video, I'm going to be talking about what is arguably the most essential use of games in a phonics lesson, and that's blending. Without blending, a student is not going to learn to read effectively. Well, they can, but they're not going to learn to read through utilizing phonics effectively without enough attention paid to blending. And this is an issue because a lot of the time phonics syllabi, or at least textbook-based syllabi, don't put sufficient emphasis onto blending, or at least they do, but they don't in the textbook aspects. And there's an obvious reason for this, is that, well, blending is not something that's very easy to do in a book. It really needs to be done in an interaction between the teacher and the students. And blending is also, it's not knowledge. In fact, all of learning to read, it's not knowledge, it's not something we know, it's a skill. It requires practice in order for us to be able to do it effectively. So for all of these reasons, blending is something that when we're trying to cover it, we have to cover it in these up sections, the interactive sections of our phonics lessons. We can't rely on books, and we can't rely on pieces of paper to teach how to blend and get students to practice and develop this skill. So we need to do it through activities like some of the ones I'm going to go through here. Now, the thing about phonics, friends, is that we try to introduce blending right at the very, very beginning. So right after students have learned these basic 5 vowels behind me, as soon as we introduce our first consonant, we are trying to get students to begin to think about blending. And hopefully through this early introduction, it becomes a natural part of the process of learning to read, rather than a later stage after we've finished with the sound letter associations. So let's look at some of the activities that we can do right at the very beginning first, and then we will, as this video progresses, we will look at other elements that we can bring in when students have more access to a greater number of sound letter associations, and also when they're trying to put together more complex words. So at the basic level, what we're trying to do is not necessarily blend together and read words, it's to practice the mechanics of blending, getting them as familiar with it as possible. So at its basic level, one of the things that I would like to do is use the board. I will often review in early activities in the game sound letter associations. So quite often, the beginning of a lesson, I will have the sounds reviewed and put up at the board as part of a warm-up. But once they're up, I won't take them down. I'll leave them up, and we can use them for blending later on. So hypothetically, if I was to be introducing a new sound, let's say I'm introducing B, and it's right at the beginning of their course. Once we've introduced the sound, as an initial activity, I will let the students select one of the vowels and then try and blend it. It's not really a game, but it gives them a degree of agency. They can choose which vowel they like the most, they can choose which vowel they're most comfortable with, and they can listen to other students. So let's say student A likes oh, and we can bring it down here, and they can try and read the bo. Student B, maybe they don't like oh, they like ah. We can pull it down here, and they can try and read this blend here. Incidentally, if you want some guides on the different ways that each of the consonant blends, there are other videos that look at that. I recommend you look at those. I'm not going to talk about that here. So, as I say, it's not really a game. It may not sound very fun, but it is interactive, and it has several advantages in terms of helping the students learn. By using the faces, we personify these sounds that they're trying to put together. And by having a physical movement of these cards and the contrast between the different sounds, we are reinforcing the skill on lots of different levels at the same time. So hopefully it should have a good benefit for them. Once we've got more sounds in the bank, as it were, add a few more here. Let's add the other initial consonant sounds. Once you have more of a bank, then you start to be able to do more substitution games. Now, substitution is quite good because it helps them to develop their segmenting, so to understanding the different parts of a word and the boundaries between the sounds within them, and it helps them by seeing what stays the same and what is different. So you could apply the same approach where they have to blend two sounds, but they can pick which one. So maybe let's say student A is a big fan of S and they like I. They can then choose these two and try and blend them together. Si. Let's say student B likes T and although is not a popular one. Very rarely choose but they could then read this as ta, So you get the idea. It's not a very complicated procedure. It's not really a game, but there's lots of variations that we can do within it. We can get the students to line up, make it much more of a physical activity. Each takes their turn to come up to the board, and they have their moment being the focal point at the head of the class. We can do it so that when the sounds have been used, they're taken off the board, and that way we know that we're practicing all of the sounds equally. So if you've got a group which tend to rely on some of the easier sounds to form, for example at and o, and they tend to shy away from the more challenging blends, then you have a way of making sure that those get included. So I'm not going to go for every variation in these basic consonant vowel blending activity, but you can get the idea that there is a lot of ways that you can adapt it to make it a little bit more effective.